And we're back with another video on abortions. Mr. Seth Dillon here is going to talk to us a little bit about the misinformation in the abortion debate and why that is harmful. But of course, as with all pro-lifers, their claims are full of misinformation and a lack of understanding or sympathy with the mother's situation. So let's have a look at this and see how hard we can bang our heads on the desk.
Really quickly, before I move on from the misinformation thing, I want to go back to a point that I made on Rogan's show. I said harmful misinformation is calling that baby a clump of cells. That is true harmful misinformation.
I've said this once and I'll say it again. Calling it a clump of cells when it's a blastocyst is literally what it is. It's not misinformation, it's literally scientifically what it is. Between calling it that and a human, calling it a human being is much more biased and is closer to misinformation. Words have implications and connotations behind them. No matter what we talk about, the most neutral way to call something is always going to be the most objective. So, a clump of cells is very objective because it doesn't assign meaning behind it, which it shouldn't. Once you start using words that have heavy meaning behind them, such as baby, that instantly turns it subjective. That is closer to misinformation than anything.
But you can say anything that you want in support of the pro-abortion cause, and it's never flagged for harmful misinformation. And it actually results in death. Certainly, not just by chance. Not just, oh, maybe if you don't wear a mask, you might infect somebody. No. If you have an abortion, you're killing someone on purpose. Certainly.
Okay, there you go again. Killing someone on purpose is very subjective, because a clump of cells is most certainly not a person. Well, if you want to go that path, two can play at this game. You pro-life activists are purposely destroying the lives of women in the country. Oh, you're also killing women on purpose, because many women die from birth complications that an abortion would have otherwise saved them. If you want to point fingers, then your side is definitely causing much more harm, but that's a story for another video.
Harmful misinformation is everywhere on this topic. And it is never called out. And it's so easy to think of some examples. I'm gonna run through a few of them for you. Harmful misinformation is telling a woman that abortion is a decision about her body when another body and life is at stake.
Your use of the word misinformation is so goddamn dumb. These are your opinions that you're trying to tell people. In the debate regarding whether or not the fetus is part of the woman's body or if a clump of cells can be considered a human being, that's a subjective debate. When you say, quote, misinformation, that implies that there's truth, specifically scientific truth behind it. And you're acting as if pro-choice arguments here are literally against indisputable facts, and that's just simply not the case. If we're talking about something like, I don't know, juicing can cure cancer, then that is misinformation because it has been scientifically proven that it doesn't. It literally goes against facts. But if we're talking about if the color teal is closer to blue or green, that's subjective. And I'm not going to call people who say it's closer to blue that is misinformation. Similarly, if you call a clump of cells a baby or not a baby, that's not fact either way because we're arguing semantics and word definitions here, which have no objectivity in terms of fact or not, so therefore you can't say either side is misinformation. That being said, I understand what you're trying to do here. You're trying to exaggerate and call it misinformation because you want to make pro-choice positions seem more extreme. But I'm sorry, you don't win this debate by manipulating definitions. Your arguments only have merit if the argument itself is good, which so far has been extremely disappointing. Now, to address your argument directly, it is indeed a part of the woman's body, and therefore the decision about abortion is about her own body. Like I said in my previous abortion video, if my hypothetical 5-year-old son, who is a full-fledged human being by the way, needs a kidney donation or else dies, and I'm a perfect match, I'm not obligated to give my kidney. I have every right to my own body, even if it means the 5-year-old kid dies, because you're not allowed to forcibly leech off another person's body without their permission in order to survive, just like a fetus isn't allowed to leech off a woman's body without her permission. So when a woman makes a decision, she can absolutely decide to go for an abortion by thinking only about her own body. But of course, in reality, there's a lot when it comes to making that decision, from your body to your financial stability to your capabilities. But of course, in reality, there's a lot when it comes to making that decision, from your body to your financial stability to your capabilities, health of the baby, etc. It doesn't matter what the woman chooses as her reason for abortion. It may as well be because she doesn't want to sacrifice her body. Regardless, the choice is hers.
Harmful misinformation is calling a baby a clump of cells or a parasite. They go that far as to call it a parasite.
It is, by definition, a parasite. Now, at first glance, you may think that it is a very subjective language because parasites come with a very negative connotation to the thing being described, but that's only colloquially. In science, many terms that have connotations elsewhere does not have the same connotation when used in a scientific setting. Two examples off the top of my head are obese and retard. When used outside of a scientific setting, these can be very offensive, but within a scientific setting, they're not because they become objective scientific terms that are only used for their definitions without any baggage behind them. It's hard to get a feel feel for that unless you're a scientist yourself, but just trust me on this one. Anyway, the word parasite is one of those examples, defined by something that leeches off another being in order to survive. It's just a scientific definition with no other meaning behind it. So when we call a fetus a parasite, we don't mean anything bad behind it, but rather it's just to emphasize that the fetus leeches off the mother in order to survive. That's it. It's useful in certain settings of discussion because it allows for people to better understand the toll on the mother's body when caring for a child.
Harmful misinformation is calling abortion healthcare. Like I told Joe Rogan, I think abortion is healthcare, the way that rape is lovemaking.
Good thing you added the I think part there, because what you think certainly isn't a correct analogy. First of all, in rape, the rapist is trying to gain something in the expense of someone else rather than preventing the loss of something that the victim is taking from them. Second of all, the victim is an actual human being here, which is indefinitely worse than the victim being a clump of cells, but whatever. Even if it is an actual human being, abortion is still acceptable. If we're going to use a rape analogy, let's say person A is the rapist and person B is the victim. The correct analogy wouldn't be that person A is assaulting person B, but rather there's no assault happening to begin with and person B is leeching off person A somehow. Let's say person B threatens person A to give them a certain amount of money per month, and then the act of abortion here would be that person A decides not to give person B any more money. Person B may die because they don't have money to buy food anymore, but that's not on the hands of person A. It's important to know whenever you make an analogy here on who the victim here is, or rather who is the one making sacrifices. The clump of cells or fetus is not making sacrifices, the mother is. So if the mother is the one paying the sole price, she should be the one to have full control over whether or not she wants to end that relationship. Oh, regarding the abortion is healthcare part, I made an entire video about that already, so I'll just refer you to that instead of repeating everything.
Harmful misinformation is presenting abortion, not adoption, as the best answer to unwanted pregnancy.
Okay, again, you're throwing around the word misinformation without using it properly, but whatever. Adoption most certainly is a fine solution for a mother that doesn't want a child, but the topic is incredibly complicated. First of all, there are plenty of unwanted children already, and until we reduce that number to 0, we shouldn't be introducing more unwanted babies. Second of all, giving up your child to adoption is an option for the parents to choose, but it shouldn't be their only option. No one is pushing abortion as being the only one solution that fits all of your needs. It's only an option, because all of these options have pros and cons, and it takes a lot of decision making in order to go through with one. For example, medical abortion has the option of being easy, but it can be costly and may require therapy and consultation for the mother, potentially having to live with that decision. Giving up your baby for adoption is another difficult decision because you have to live the rest of your life knowing you have an offspring somewhere, not to mention the difficulty of it and whether or not that baby would be able to find a suitable home. There are pros and cons to either decision, which is why providing both options is important. No one is saying that abortion is meant to replace adoption, but both options have to be present. Pro-lifers are literally the only ones that think pro-choice people love abortions and would do it over any other possible alternative, and that's just not the case. We understand the goods and bads of both abortions and leaving the child for adoption, and as a result understand the need for both.
Harmful misinformation is telling women they're better off living with the guilt of killing their preborn children than coping with financial hardship. Can you imagine?
Huh? Who is telling women that? No one. That's who. No one is telling women that abortion is better than financial hardship. That is for the women themselves to decide. When was the fucking last time anyone went up to any woman and made that decision for her? Unless, of course, it's the husband or someone else in her life who has a right to say, but people outside of that woman's life, such as the doctor, the state, or anyone really, doesn't have a right to tell that woman what decision she should make with her pregnancy. Actually, pro-lifers are the ones that are being the assholes here, telling women what to do, to not have an abortion. Look, here's the difference between you and me. You are actively telling women what to do, to not have an abortion and to have an offspring. Meanwhile, I'm not telling them what to do, but rather am arguing for the importance of having options for them. See the difference here? Instead of saying pro-choice vs pro-life, the better analogy would be pro-choice vs anti-choice.
Can you imagine telling a woman that she's better off killing her children than being poor? Is that really preferable?
Good thing no one tells women that. A woman's situation is hers alone, and therefore it's her decision to make. Also, not to mention, you talk as if being poor is not a legitimate reason to having an abortion. Well, if a woman is living paycheck to paycheck and can hardly even support herself, imagine how she would even try to take care of a baby. I get it, Seth, you're probably swimming in money yourself, so you wouldn't understand anything about true financial hardships.
Harmful misinformation is framing abortion as self-defense. It's a real argument. They try to say that you're defending yourself. You're defending your body. You're defending your autonomy.
It is self-defense because the fetus is a leech, but that being said, no one actually uses that argument until the topic of abortion in the event of saving the mother's life is mentioned. Because if there is a law that restricts abortion even if the mother would lose her life, you can then legally argue self-defense against the fetus, but that's a topic for another video.
You know, there are limits to autonomy. I'm a parent, I have 2 kids. I can't do whatever I want. I have to go home at some point, check on them, make sure they're eating, left them home alone. There are limits.
Okay, so for the rest of the video, he talks about limits and things you are responsible for, then he makes an insensitive joke about the act of giving birth. Whatever. The thing is, when your child is born into the world, you do have a responsibility and you have to make sacrifices for their sake. But it's entirely different than sacrificing your own body. Sure, when you have a kid, you'll have to provide food, make sure they're healthy, etc., but it's a whole different story when instead of external things you have to provide to them, instead you have to sacrifice your own body, say giving a kidney to them, or having them leech off your body, or anything along those lines. There's a huge distinction here that needs to be recognized. Yes, you have a legal responsibility to feed your kids, but you don't have a legal responsibility to give them one of your lungs. Okay, done ranting. See you next time.